So what is a bust-proof player, right? To me, a bust-proof player is a guy that you know for sure is not going to finish within top 5 spots outside of actually where you drafted him at. This is typically someone who's going to be at their peak age, where they're in their prime with no major offensive changes to shake things up. So therefore, the only thing affecting their outcome could be a potential injury. The reality is there's very few bust-proof players, and I got one guy I think of as Jamar Chase. Just make sure to go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel before we get into it to show your support. So with Jamar Chase, obviously he's the 101 everywhere. He's the wide receiver 1 everywhere. And obviously I'm not saying that he's going to be the wide receiver 1 all over again. But if we keep in mind, I don't believe that Jamar Chase finishes outside of the wide receiver 6 or maybe even the wide receiver 5. If you go back to all the way to his rookie year, that was when he had his breakout season as the wide receiver 5, and he was the wide receiver 12 while missing 5 games. That's actually absurd if you really think about how good a wide receiver 12 finish is when you miss 5 games on top of that. Then in 2023, he did miss a game. Additionally, he was missing Joe Burrow, so I'm not holding that against him. And then obviously last year, he was the wide receiver 1. To me, it just makes a lot of sense, especially in that first round. I don't know if I view another player in the first round as bust-proof if I view Jamar Chase. And then Josh Allen is, again, the only guy I truly believe is bust-proof no matter what. Josh Allen has a 19.4 ADP on Yahoo and a 22.2 ADP on ESPN. He's the quarterback 1 everywhere you're drafting him, and I truly don't believe, even if you made this a don't finish worse than the quarterback 3 type of situation, I don't think he's going to do that either. Josh Allen, for the last several years, you could see, he has been a top 2 quarterback since the year 2019. What else doesn't he do? He doesn't miss games. The only games that he missed were his rookie year when he actually wasn't starting right out of the gate. Josh Allen doesn't miss games. It's not that he doesn't get banged up. It's just that he's so big and so tough that he's not going to miss games. So essentially what it comes down to is the only thing that can stop him is if he truly gets injured and misses time. Well, I don't want to jinx it because it's been so successful, but it really does feel like he's truly a bust-proof player without fear of real injury. And what you're going to find throughout this video is the point of this video is to help you figure out what type of draft strategy you want to use, particularly in the early rounds of the draft. Because with Josh Allen and Jamar Chase, obviously you know those guys have tons of upside. But again, I'm not going to come out here and lie to you and say that a player like David Montgomery is bust-proof. I think there's only few bust-proof players this year in fantasy football. So really, do you want to do safety within your first 3 rounds, or do you want to take a big leap? Because in my eyes, if I get Josh Allen in the 3rd round or in the back of the 2nd round, I could take a big leap at the third round pick because I know Josh Allen won't bust for me. Now, get into our other early round guys that I also think are bust-proof. Amon-Ra St. Brown definitely constitutes as a bust-proof player. He has a 10.9 ADP on Yahoo and 11.5 ADP on ESPN. Now, again, before I discuss why I think Amon-Ra is bust-proof, I do believe that Amon-Ra is in a particular spot. If you're at the back of the first round, if you want safety, he is safer than Malik Neighbors. He is safer than Nico Collins. He is safer than Brian Thomas. Those are the guys that he's safer than, and I believe bust-proof because I just don't see him finishing lower than a wide receiver 10 finish when he's ranked as the wide receiver 5 on Yahoo and ESPN. He's going 11.5 ADP off the board on ESPN and 10.9 ADP on Yahoo. So you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown's career. Outside of that rookie year, he's been a top 10 wide receiver. And this is a guy who's still in the primary part of his career where he is peaking right now. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, I don't see how he particularly busts. Because also another factor you have to put into Amon-Ra St. Brown as well is that Amon-Ra St. Brown has historically been a great target hog in this Detroit offense. Well, the problem that he's had, particularly last year, even with a wide receiver 3 finish, it didn't feel as stable because of the fact that Jameson Williams was breaking out. Sam Laporta has obviously been a factor. But I believe, and I've said this several times this offseason, John Morton, the new offensive coordinator, just will simply not be able to utilize all of those assets offensively as good as Ben Johnson did. So I think, therefore, it goes down to the top 3 guys. The big 3, which I believe are Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Sam Laporta. I think those are your main fantasy players in Detroit this year. So I have no issue taking Amon-Ra St. Brown as the wide receiver 5 because he is bust-proof. And I think Ladd McConkey is as well. Moving over to Ladd McConkey has a 24.6 ADP on Yahoo and a 30 ADP on ESPN. Wide receiver 11 on Yahoo, wide receiver 12 on ESPN. Listen, Ladd McConkey was the wide receiver 12 last year. And if you remember correctly, Ladd McConkey in his first half of the season wasn't getting consistently wide receiver 1 targets. Then, of course, you go to the back half of the year. And, of course, particularly, I would say the last 6 weeks is when Ladd McConkey really started to be the consistent main target of Justin Herbert here. And then you kind of look over to this year, and it's like, I remember thinking during the offseason, the early part, that they would make some moves at wide receiver this year. Outside of Trey Harris investment, I mean, they got Mike Williams back, but he's already on the PUP list. Ladd McConkey is going to be this wide receiver 1 all over again. And so when you look at Ladd McConkey's target totals in 2024, I think he surpasses 112 targets by a mile. And he had 7 touchdowns with those 112 targets. So the way you can look at it is this. Either Ladd McConkey has a similar workload to what he did last year. I think Ladd McConkey is a touchdown-efficient player at 14 yards per reception, which I don't view as a particularly sticky stat. But I do think Ladd McConkey has shown enough yards per route run-wise that he is going to be really good after the catch. And then Ladd McConkey, also you can look at it this way, he's going to get 140, 150 targets. Even if he misses out on 3 touchdowns this year and only has 4, he's still going to be a top 15 wide receiver in fantasy football with that kind of target share. So to me, Ladd McConkey may not finish as the wide receiver 11, but I don't see him finishing past the wide receiver 16. I just think he's too important in this offense with too good of a quarterback for him to really be able to bust for you in fantasy this year. Now, Josh Jacobs is my next guy that I want to talk about here, and this one really does astonish me because his ADP is 15.9 on Yahoo, 19.1 on ESPN, and it's not like he's like some cheap pick or anything like that. Not accusing anybody of not valuing him as a good pick in fantasy because he is a good value. He's the RB8 on Yahoo and RB9 on ESPN. I've had him ranked as the RB5, RB6 all offseason long. I think he's going to be a great run-it-back type of player. He was the RB5 last year. If you remember correctly, they were trying really hard at the beginning of the season to not have it all right on Josh Jacobs. They did not want him taking over 30, 25-plus, opportunities on a per-game basis. Then they realized we kind of have to do that because Jordan Love wasn't performing very well last year. So they re-identified themselves as a run-first team. That's when Josh Jacobs shined. And they did really well as a team because of that. So then you ask yourself, well, what's changed this year? Did they get a new running back? No. You still got Marshawn Lloyd as that running back too. Maybe they get him more involved this year. Maybe they don't. But even if they got Marshawn Lloyd more involved this year, I think Josh Jacobs is still going to be extremely efficient on the ground and is going to be a major touchdown threat at the red zone. Then you think about, what their offensive line looks like. Same as last year. This team has done nothing big to be able to worry people in a big way that Josh Jacobs is not going to be bust-proof. He 100% will be a bust-proof player. So Josh Jacobs, to me, is a great guy to target. I don't care if you are on ESPN, Yahoo, Underdog, I don't care where you are. Josh Jacobs still, to me, is a great value because I still see him as a top 5, top 6 running back, and I definitely don't think he'll finish worse than the RB15, which is what he would have to do for him to bust for you this year. Josh Jacobs is not a bust player. He is a bust-proof player in 2025 fantasy football. And the best part about it is his value is even better on Underdog. Like this guy, since it is a 3 wide receiver format, Underdog drafts have him lower than the top of the second round than you would have to get on ESPN and in Yahoo leagues. And Josh Jacobs is the RB10 on Underdog right now. Excellent value. I target Josh Jacobs a lot. And if you want to target him as well at that particularly great value and get some huge upside from doing it, go down in the comments. There's a link there. You can use code FVN when you sign up for Underdog. They'll match your first deposit 50% up to $1,000. You can get into Best Ball Mania, which is a $25 buy-in. $2 million in first place. The puppy is going live right now. $5 buy-in, $100K to first place. And I won $19,000 playing underdog best ball drafts last year. So you should give yourself a shot at doing it, because I'm telling you right now who the good values are in underdog. Now, moving on to number 6 right here, I've got Jackson Smith-Njigba also as a bust fruit player. I understand, guys, it's not a sexy pick, right? This is not a pick that you want to come out and say, yeah, I'm putting my balls on the table this year with Jackson Smith-Njigba. Jackson Smith-Njigba is just going to get the job done at a 42.4 ADP on ESPN. Now, I want to highlight him particularly on ESPN because he's going about 10 picks higher in Yahoo leagues, and I do see there being a way he could bust it at a Yahoo league. But on ESPN, where he's the wide receiver 16, I do not see him finishing worse as a top 20 wide receiver. I just do not see it. Listen, it's interesting to me because Jackson Smith-Njigba started out the offseason really hot because obviously they moved on from DK Metcalf and they moved on from Tyler Lockett. So obviously everybody's thinking, well, there's going to be tons of targets for Jackson Smith-Njigba. Then people start to sit in their, thoughts about Sam Darnold coming to town, and all of a sudden Jackson Smith-Njigba is dropping in draft boards. And I'm buying that dip all day long. This was the wide receiver 10 last year, who last year, again, with DK, with Tyler Lockett, was the wide receiver 1. He had 137 targets, and he had 6 touchdowns. I don't think that Jackson Smith-Njigba, for example, is ever going to be a 12-touchdown guy. He's just not explosive enough to be like that. He's not a Brian Thomas Jr. type of player. He's not a Jamar Chase, Malik Neighbors type of player where he's going to be getting tons of touchdowns. But Jackson Smith-Njigba is absolutely going to get 150 targets this year. Take it to the bank. The only way he doesn't, again, is if he gets freaking injured. And Jackson Smith-Njigba, you look at other guys that are going around him in his range, like Marvin Harrison Jr. could be a big boom play, but he is not a guy that I would call bust-proof in any sense of the word. He could easily be the wide receiver 30 all over again in 2025. If you want safety, Jackson Smith-Njigba is that. Even though Sam Darnold may not be good or as good as Geno Smith was last year, it does not take away from the fact that Jackson Smith-Njigba is the main target there. And of course, some people, I think they're mostly outliers at this point, will say Cooper Kupp is going to be a problem for Jackson Smith-Njigba. Think about it like this. Jackson Smith-Njigba and Cooper Kupp both ran slow 40 times. That is a fact. So both of these guys, if you actually watch them on film, they're basically very similar players. They're crisp route runners. They have good lateral quickness. They can get up the field and accelerate, but neither one of them is a burn you with their speed type of player and getting a big route. That's not either one of these players. One of them, JSN, is in his prime, while the other one is 32 years old. Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to be the main target in this offense, and I guarantee that he's getting 150 targets this year unless he gets injured. Jackson Smith-Njigba will not bust as the wide receiver 16 on ESPN. Now, also, I think that this guy is really bust-proof as well. I love Jaylen Herz this year. Jaylen Herz everywhere, basically, is the quarterback 4. Below Jaden Daniels, he's got a 33.1 ADP on Yahoo, and he's got a 34.3 ADP on ESPN. And again, he's the quarterback 4 in both Yahoo and ESPN, underdog, basically everywhere you can find him. He is the quarterback 4. He's my quarterback 3. I'd rather have him over Jaden Daniels. Listen, Jaylen Herz last year was his worst year in fantasy since the year of 2021, which would have been his second year in the NFL. So I think a lot of people are kind of hesitant and wondering a question that I've always asked, which is, does this guy actually have the ability to be a 30-touchdown type of thrower? I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think that he peaked with Shane Steichen for sure as a thrower. But there's 2 things that bring me back with Jaylen Herz right now. Number 1, if we wanted to look at the bust-proof requirements that I set out, it would be for quarterbacks finishing 3 spots lower than where he's being drafted at. So he would have to be the quarterback 7 or beyond to bust this year in fantasy football. Well, let's look at last year, right? He was the quarterback 8 in fantasy football. He also played 15 games, though. So you got to be fair to him, and let's say that he played 17 games. He needed 9 points to be the quarterback 7 and beat out Bo Nix. Do we think he could have done that? Obviously, he could have done that. He needed 17 points in 2 weeks to be the quarterback 6. He could have easily done that as well. So last year, it was not nearly as bad, I think, as a lot of people think. Number two is that they have the tush-push still. So you could basically bank on this guy being a 10-plus touchdown type of ball carrier on a consistent basis. That will not change here. And I think most people understand that, which brings me to my third reason, which I think a lot of people do overlook, which is that they're going to have to throw the ball more this year. I highlighted this on different research that I did, particularly with Saquon Barkley, where I highlighted all running backs who handled more than 350 carries in a fantasy season and what happened to them the following year. And what I found is that all these players, if a team had a guy who had 350 opportunities in the previous year, if they came in that following year and tried to up that total even more, 100% of those guys got injured. 100%. So I just don't think that it's realistic to even expect Saquon to get within 50 touches of what he did last year. I just don't think that's realistic. Jaylen Herz will have to throw the ball more this year. They just can't afford not to. To keep Saquon healthy, they're going to have to throw with Jaylen Herz more. And that's why I believe his floor this year is actually a little bit higher, because we all know that his ceiling is really great. But of course, a high floor is going to make him a bust-proof player in 2025. Now, getting into my last guy that's in the early rounds, and I'm going to go through a couple mid-round guys here. I've got Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers is also a guy that I don't think is a put your balls on the table type of pick. If you want to take a big shot, you want to go with a Jaylen Waddle, who I do believe personally has more upside to be a top 12 guy in 2025 than Zay does. But Zay Flowers is not going to bust for you. Jaylen Waddle could. Zay Flowers, 61.2 ADP on Yahoo, 69 ADP on ESPN. He's the wide receiver 23 on Yahoo and the wide receiver 25 on ESPN. There's just no way that he is not a top 30 wide receiver. If you look back to his first 2 years in the NFL, he's had the wide receiver 30 finish his rookie year, wide receiver 24 finish in his sophomore year. Now, what you would expect, and what I expected, what many people expected last year from Zay, was that he was going to really get a really big target share increase than what he had his rookie year. Well, if you look at it, he actually played one more game in 2024, and he only had 8 more targets than he did in 2023. So really, the target share was still the same. Now, you may be wondering, well, Ryan, how is that good for Zay Flowers? Well, the reason it's good is because you know he does have a place in the offense. And in my opinion, he is the best wide receiver in that offense, and I believe it's in the opinion of Baltimore's coaching staff as well. Because what you have seen from the offensive coordinator over there is he has said all offseason, I need to get Zay the ball more. I just need to do that. And this is, again, a player that I've highlighted a couple different times this offseason, saying that not only do I believe he has bust-proof upside, I think he has breakout potential as well. The thing with Zay Flowers that makes me want to take him in drafts is not because he's bust-proof. I don't particularly play it safe in fantasy football. I'm more of a risk taker. I actually see breakout potential with Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers is a guy that I've discussed on breakout wide receiver videos, fitting the breakout metrics right here. He's also at an age where it is typically ideal, and research has proven it over the last 10 years that wide receivers typically break out. And this guy is also potentially could sign a big deal after this year if he does really well. So Zay Flowers, to me, there's just no way he busts at this particular draft spot right here, because he hasn't finished past that in any of his years in fantasy football. And I don't think that he's going to lose importance this year. I think, if anything, his importance goes up in this offense and he gets in the end zone more. So not only is he bust-proof, I actually think this is a breakout potential player. Zay Flowers, to me, is a really good pick. Now, I want to go through a couple more guys here in the middle rounds that I particularly love the ADP on, and I think there's just no possible way. For example, that DeAndre Swift is a bust. DeAndre Swift is not a... It's been such a weird offseason, man, because I'm not and never have been a DeAndre Swift guy. I think that he's always been overrated. But this guy, this year, I have found myself time and time again defending him, and not only defending him, drafting him a ton. I've drafted a ton of this guy in Underdog because his ADP is great there, and it's still great on these other platforms. 73.7 ADP on Yahoo, 71.2 ADP on ESPN. This is the running back 27 on Yahoo and the running back 24 on ESPN. Listen, 5 spots lower would be the RB32. Do you really think the RB1 in Ben Johnson's offense, with an offensive line that's been vastly improved, in this offseason is really going to finish less than a running back 30 finish? Ask yourself that question. Because to me, it's not possible. And then the other thing with DeAndre Swift, and again, I'm not a huge DeAndre Swift guy, but history is history. DeAndre Swift has never had a bottom 25 running back finish. He has always been a top 25 running back. That's just the reality of his situation, is he has always been good enough in fantasy football. The difference in previous years is that he's always been valued higher. So this year, you're actually getting him at a good price. And a lot of people are not seeing this yet. I have not seen a drastic price increase of DeAndre Swift this offseason since the NFL draft, where they took nobody, by the way. And again, the reason why it's such a good value this year, and not only a great value, but absolutely bust-proof, is that unless DeAndre Swift gets hurt, he's got a great offensive mind at head coach now, who perfectly executed the two running back system, which I don't believe is going to be a problem for Swift, because I think Roschon is a great goal line back, but I think Swift has made a name for himself enough to know that he's a great pass-catching / open field running back. Swift is going to get tons of opportunities. And again, the offensive line is drastically improved. Good offensive coaches come in right away. They clean up that offensive line. That's what Ben Johnson did. You can keep fading DeAndre Swift all you want, but I'm telling you right now, for those of you who want a smart pick and know this guy's not going to bust, I'm telling you DeAndre Swift's a great player. And I think he does have breakout top 15 upside, but I'm not going to tell you that he's a bigger pop player than more of a safe player. At this price, this is rock solid. Now, the last guy I want to go through today is Khalil Shakir. And again, I've discussed Khalil Shakir a couple times already in fantasy as well. 118.4 ADP on Yahoo and 108.3 ADP on ESPN. Wide receiver 44 on Yahoo, wide receiver 43 on ESPN. Now, Khalil Shakir, again, I did discuss him as a breakout wide receiver. And I think that with Khalil Shakir, there's a couple things that I find really curious right now. So he's the wide receiver 38 last year in 2024. Right, so he was the clear wide receiver 1 in this offense, which did not throw nearly as much as they historically do with Josh Allen, and didn't really have a viable, true wide receiver 1 option. Like when Khalil Shakir is your wide receiver 1, I will say, across the NFL, he's not a great wide receiver 1. But in fantasy football, this will work at this current price, and there's no way he is a wide receiver 50 candidate. This guy is going to finish as a top 36 wide receiver this year. Book it. This guy not only got signed to a big extension this year, they proved that he was their guy. But this also is an offense, again, which did not throw nearly as much as they historically do. So Josh Allen, I would expect to get another 50 to 70 total passes added on to his workload in 2025 that he didn't have in 2024. And then you also add on top of the fact that Buffalo did nothing at the wide receiver / pass catcher position overall. They're banking on Dalton Kincaid's breakout. They're banking on Keon Coleman's breakout. But if you're telling me Josh Palmer's going to come in here and take targets away from Khalil Shakir, you clearly have not been watching film. Josh Palmer is not nearly as good of a player as Khalil Shakir. So Shakir, to me, I think that it always brings me back to the Mike Tyson quote. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Buffalo may want Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid to break out, but let's say that one or both of them falter, who's going to be there? The proven guy that we saw last year do this in fantasy football, which is Khalil Shakir. So you can expect Khalil Shakir either way, even if one or both of those guys break out, to not lose importance in this offense, because at the very least, he will be a possession type of receiver. So at this price here, this is an extremely safe bet for him to finish not only at the current value that you're drafting him as a wide receiver 44 or a wide receiver 43, but this is also a really safe bet to finish as a top 38 wide receiver and really become a consistent flex for your fantasy football team. So let me know what player you feel safe is taking right now in 2025 fantasy football. And if you want to see the players I'm avoiding round by round in fantasy drafts this year, click on this video right here.